now.
Okay.
We have 14 people waiting for us.
Oh, all right.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Good evening to everyone, and welcome to Left My Heart at the Masjid. Today is Monday, and as you know, every Monday is Mental Health Mondays. Today we'll be discussing the topic of keeping families together. And I'm delighted to be joined by Imam Salahuddin and Brother John
Schweikler.
Schweikler. I apologize. I should have worked that out. Brother John Schweikler. And we'll be discussing keeping families together. To start us off properly with the right Islamic note, I'd like to invite Imam Salahuddin to give us a brief dua.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Ya Allah, we come to you today. We come to you tonight with open minds and open hearts. And we are praying that you will inspire all of us to continue to do your will, even in the face of the coronavirus. We pray that you will protect us, that you will heal those of us who are sick, and that you will, as you have already told us, help us to be winners by making sure that when this thing is over, that the Muslims are left standing along with all of the other human beings that you have created. And Allah, we pray that we never leave you and you never leave us. And we pray that we die not unless we die in the state of Islam. Ameen.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair, Imam Salahuddin.
Right, yeah.
I appreciate the English duas. It's easier for me to follow along.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. So our first guest on this topic of keeping families together is Brother John Schweikler. John Schweikler is a licensed marriage and family therapist with 8 years of experience working in several different settings. His specialty is helping families that are facing health difficulties. Currently, John works at a local cancer center providing medical family therapy services to cancer patients and their loved ones. Prior to his work as a therapist, John worked in educational settings such as after-school tutoring and recreational programs. Assalamu alaikum, John. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. I really appreciate you having me and for giving me a chance to talk to some people in our community. I really appreciate that.
Of course. We're honored to have you on. As our viewers might know, we have the IAR mental health team. That's IAR, RaleighMasjid.org/health. And our mental health team does clinical referrals. They can refer you to a great psychologist, or they can talk to you about certain things like substance abuse or mental health issues. And right. John and Imam Salahuddin are both tremendous resources to our community, and I'm so glad that they're able to provide this for us. So John, what inspired you to join the mental health team before I take it off into your section?
Well, I happened to hear an announcement from Imam AbuTaleb a few years ago when they were considering putting the team together, that they were looking for people with a mental health background or something linked to that, and to contribute to some sort of committee that would see how they could address or better address those needs in our community. As we got more involved, I realized that this was something that the imams are hearing about quite often, but we're often feeling like they didn't have the tools they needed, not having all the mental health training that, say, a counselor or a substance abuse counselor or a family therapist, not having that specific training. They didn't always feel as equipped as they needed to help people address those needs. And honestly, for me, it jumped out because that is what I do in a lot of my work. Working in medical settings, they run into mental health problems really often with their patients as well. The doctors do, the physician assistants, nurse practitioners, all those folks, but don't always have the tools they need to address those. And having the ability to reach out to somebody who has that training, whether it's to actually see that patient, to give them some advice on how to respond, can be really helpful. And so when they put that announcement out, I was really interested to be a part of that and see how we could to help the folks here.
Well, we're blessed to have you as part of the team. I know that a lot of people have come with glowing recommendations of the mental health team, and between both of you two specifically. So I'm very grateful that you guys are part of the team to provide that courage and that compassionate side to the mosque, that we have someone to reach out to during these times of need. And especially right now, there's a lot of professionals, a lot of doctors that are out there that are encountering circumstances of grief, families not being able to be with their loved ones in their dying moments, and having someone that has that experience, those resources, is massive for the community at large. So I thank Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Could you tell me more now about how do I keep my family together? My mom and I have been at each other's heads now because I have not kept my room clean enough. But I'd love any suggestions you have on keeping the family together and through this quarantine season.
Yeah. So first, I'd say that I think it's important to recognize just how difficult of a time this is for all of our families. So many things have changed in such a short period of time. You know, there are people who are out of work. There are people who are working from home suddenly. Whole families that are spending all day together that normally they might be used to having just a few hours at the beginning and the end of the day where they're all in one space. I think it can be a challenge for any group of people to spend that much time together and not get on each other's nerves from time to time. So I think in this period of time, I put together a couple ideas here that I think might help folks cope with all these changes that have come and find a way for everybody in the family to be in a better place as they go through this time. And so to start off, I would say I think it's important to find a balance between your time together and your time on your own. We all need both of those things to varying degrees to keep us in a good place. So I would say, you know, consider making a plan as a family to allow for different members to have time alone, whether that's all at the same time, or I've got a young daughter. It can be sometimes a challenge to have everybody get that time that they need to recharge on their own. But it can be a nice gift from one spouse to another to say, you know, why don't I give you 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes or a half hour? I'll keep an eye on the kids. Why don't you go take a few minutes to recharge, whether that's reading a book, whether that's prayer, whether that's making a call to a family member. Do what you need to. And even though this sounds like something that would be a goal for just that person, I think when we all have that time on our own, we can bring our best selves to the relationships that we have at home, whether that's to our spouse or to our friends, our family. When we are at our best, we can bring our best selves to those relationships. On that same end, I think creating a plan to spend time together, both as a family, as a couple, and coming to an agreement together on these things, rather than, say, coming up with a plan in our head. We go to our families and say, well, what do you guys think about playing this board game? You know, say Monopoly or something. You know, one or two people might say, no, not in a million years, not interested. I think it's good if we sit down ahead of time and say, let's come up with something together that we can do, that we can all enjoy. And so I would say, as we think about these, planning for this time together, this time apart, what makes that possible is communication. And so it's important for everybody in the family to be a part of these decisions, be part of planning these things. I often tell patients of mine, when I work with somebody, if I work with them individually and I tell them, well, when you go home, I want you to load the dishwasher in a different way, maybe load it in the morning instead of at night. The problem is, if I don't tell the other spouse when they go home, they're going to come back the next week and tell me that World War III is erupting at home. And what am I doing? So it's But had I brought them in and everybody decided, okay, you know what, I think there's a better way for us to do this. And we all come up with our ideas. We get a chance to talk about what we're feeling, what we need. Then everybody can get on the same page and we can all agree to something and we can all be excited about it. And if we've got a plan for it, if we're saying, okay, Tuesday night is our time together, is our time to watch a movie or play a game or read, whatever it might be, then everybody can come in with that same expectation, ready to spend time together, ready to enjoy their time together. And so I think planning goes a long way in this, and communication, and including everybody in that. Along those same lines with communication, I think it's important to give everybody space to talk about how hard this is. As much as we want to stay positive going through all this, sometimes our only pathway to feeling better is talking about the things that are hard. And what better place to do that than in a family environment that's supportive? And so if you are in a place where you've got family members or your whole family that can support you, and if you're feeling scared, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling like some of your relationships are suffering as a result of this isolation, these are all important things that we can all support each other in our families. So I can't emphasize enough how important communication across all these people in the family can be. And then lastly, I would say, it's important going through all this that we recognize how difficult this is on all of us. That all these changes would be really hard to adjust to even if there weren't a pandemic. But because there is one, it's just that much harder, and we're having to do it so quickly. It's important for us as we look around our families to recognize that they're struggling against this too, that they need support, and that they're not always going to be at their best. And so wherever we get the chance to be patient with them, to forgive them for times when maybe they aren't their best, when they maybe snap at us when we ask a question. Or on the flip side, hopefully they can forgive us when maybe we don't respond in the best way. I think this is something that can really carry us a long way. Try to be understanding of one another, and try to support one another going through this. I might add one more thing. Once in the past, I saw somebody who, during Ramadan, they had a wall where their family, when they saw one of their family members do a good deed, they would write it on a piece of paper and stick it up on the wall. And by the end of Ramadan, they had this wonderful collection of all these great things they had done. Maybe something similar during this period of time might be helpful. It might help us recognize what our family is doing well, what's going right, what we're proud of in our family members. It's easy when we're spending this much time together and probably seeing all the flaws and idiosyncrasies that we all have. It's important to still recognize all the good that they bring. And it's easy to lose sight of that when we're all stressed. And so sometimes a physical manifestation of that can be really helpful.
Jazakallah khair, John. That was very insightful.
Thank you.
Especially like that idea about having a plan, that, picking one day of the week that even though we're together, we have spending every day together, but picking one day of the week to get together with your family and say, we're going to put away everything and just talk. We're going to communicate properly. I think that's hugely beneficial.
Right. Sometimes in my work, I feel like my primary goal is just trying to get everybody on the same page. I think it's a product of the the very fast life that we live now, and really just getting people to sit down and just talk and listen to each other really goes a long way.
Alhamdulillah, I think definitely so much comes from proper communication. And if you have any resources for jumpstarting this communication, I'll share them with the group that's watching us, our YouTube audience, and you can stay in touch with John that way.
Sure.
I also like the idea of sticking notes on a wall. That's, physical manifestation. Yeah. I want to have a wall full of diplomas like Imam Salahuddin soon then.
Go ahead.
All the good deeds we've done.
Sticky note.
Right.
Sticky note diplomas.
I think it's I think I tell often sometimes when couples are having a hard time, it's important to still make sure you're taking time to recognize the things that are going well. We're all very good at taking an inventory of the things that aren't going well, whether it's for us or for the things other people are doing that we don't like. We're all very good at that. And we tend to write off the things that are going well because that's the way they should go in our head. And so we don't always keep track of it. But it really does make a big difference when you make an effort to really take note of that. Of those
Right.
things.
It's all about saying alhamdulillah for the blessings and for the good things we're doing, and not just focusing on the bad that someone else might do.
Right, right.
Alhamdulillah. Next up, we have Imam Salahuddin, and Imam Salahuddin will be discussing the religious component, and then we'll have Brother John back on, and our audience can ask any questions they feel like asking. I have a couple of questions myself, but we're going to have Imam Salahuddin right now to discuss some of the religious components of keeping families together. Now, I tried to write a bio for Imam Salahuddin, and then I got to 5 pages long. So I'm gonna try and distill this down. But Imam Salahuddin is, subhanAllah, a very impressive Imam, very impressive, respected community brother. Began his life as a Department of Corrections officer in the state of New York. I believe, pardon?
Chaplain.
You were a chaplain.
Yes.
You were a chaplain with the state of New York. And Imam Salahuddin actually was the former president of the American Association, or the Association of Muslim Chaplains.
Yes.
And is currently the president of the As-Salam, or the Imam of the As-Salam Islamic Center in Raleigh, North Carolina. The vice president, associate imam. I'm just trying to promote you out here.
I'm just a helper.
The vice president, you're the MVP. The vice president of the Muslim Endorsement Council, and currently holds a doctorate in Islamic Studies, Christian and Muslim Relations, and graduate certificates in Islamic Chaplaincy from Hartford Seminary. As I mentioned, Imam Salahuddin is also a member of the IAR health team, the health and mental wellness team that we have at IAR. Imam Salahuddin likes to focus on the areas of Islam, general Islamic studies, Islamic theology, and criminal justice issues. I believe Imam Salahuddin is actually one of our greatest community resources when it comes to doing chaplaincy within the correctional system in North Carolina. A little known fact is that Islam is the most popular religion that people choose to convert to while in prison. Imam Salahuddin, how are you today?
Fine, alhamdulillah. So good to be with you today.
And so good to see you.
Yeah, just want to say the praise is certainly due to the Lord of all the world. We're thankful to him. We bear witness that none deserves to be worshipped except Allah alone with our partners, and that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a slave servant and messenger. It's funny, Kashif, that you should mention the part about the prison, because one of the things that we noticed is oftentimes people are in the world, they're running all the time. They don't have time to think because they're just moving. And then they get locked up. And when they get locked up, now they have a lot of time to think. Now they've been put in a position where they have to begin to reflect and ponder and perhaps decide on what they really want to do with their lives. So with the coronavirus, we find that now all of us are put in a situation where it's like we are in a prison in our own homes, where now families that may just see each other for a couple of hours out of the day, some out of the week, are seeing each other every single day. Well, I like to just begin by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he created us to be gregarious. We are gregarious by nature. We want to be around people. He created the man and the woman to come together to be one as a family. And then from them, they have children. And of course, when you have children, you have all these little minds that you are nurturing and helping to grow up. And of course, if a man has a wife or a wife has a husband, that's another mind that you have to work with. And so the first thing that came to my mind is that after listening to John is that we can't take anyone for granted. Don't take anyone for granted, except that, you know, we are all unique and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us to be honorable and he made us to be dignified, and that we should always keep that in mind. Now I've heard that some people, they just can't take it because they just are not used to being in close quarters like this. I believe that what John was saying is based in Quran, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to plan. He tells us to plan. He says that we can plan, but he's the best of planners. Like we may have planned to go somewhere. I planned to be in Connecticut, what was it, the last week of March, or the week before the last week of March, and Allah had a different plan. So I didn't go because I couldn't go. So again, we still plan, even though we may not be able to do those things. It is important for us to do this. It's important for us to plan, and it's important for us, as you mentioned, Allah speaks about the balance. He wants us to be balanced. That means we have the right amount of things in us. Shouldn't always be about just watching TV. Shouldn't always be about just reading a book. Shouldn't always be about a person just being with themselves. But it should be the right amount of those things. So I need some time for myself. Yes. I need some time with my family. Yes. I need some time with my wife. Yes. All of those things count, but you have to begin to set it up where you have it, where you don't feel like you're overburdened by it, but you feel good. Now, I like to be real with people, and I have to tell you that the time that we've been in this house together with my granddaughter that you just saw, and we're raising her, we moved to North Carolina. We thought that the nest was empty, and then something happened, and now we're raising a granddaughter, and she came to us at 3 and she's almost 8. Okay, so we're raising her. We realized that Allah planned that. We didn't, but we're doing it. And my daughter, who was living in New York, she heard about what was going on, and she said, you know, I have a desire to be with my family, moms and pop, moms and dad. I want to come, but I'm afraid I don't want to bring anything, meaning, you know, the virus. So we told her, we said, no, come. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. Now she has things that she's able to do with the same platform, the Zoom platform. So when she has the time to do that, she does it. My wife, who has a group called Leaders by Choice, she has to do certain things with that. So I don't bother her with that. She has a chance to do it, she does it. My granddaughter, who goes to dance, who is in the Girl Scouts, who is in everything, really, Jim, now they're doing it by Zoom, the Zoom platform, so they get a chance to do that. But when they're not doing that, we come together, because remember, time is important. Allah created time, and he created for it to be utilized in the proper way. So I'm saying that Islamically speaking, we know the surah, wal asr, by the token of time, right? Surely man is in loss. So a lot of people are lost because they don't know how to divvy up their time. I love reading a good book. I also love watching a movie every now and then. I'm not one to say, hey, don't watch a movie. I watch a movie every now and then. I also love my quiet time. And I think it's important because following the pristine example of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we know even before he became the prophet, he used to go up in the hills, go up into the mountain and just think and reflect. So this whole situation has given us the opportunity to begin to do something that's very important. I like what you said, John. In the Quran, it says mashura. We should consult with each other. How we want to plan out our day, or how we want to plan out the week, how we want to set certain things up. So Monday this happens, Tuesday this happens, Wednesday this happens. And then if it doesn't happen and something else happens, it's okay. But at least we laid it out. We wasn't just sitting around. Somebody said, well, you know, oh man, I haven't had any time to sleep. Now I can sleep. After the first day or so, you're going to get tired of sleeping. You're going to want to do something. So you have to get up and begin to do it. So, as I tell couples all the time, communications is the key. If something is bothering me about the setup, I need to convey that to my wife. And when I talk to my wife, she listens to me, and then we go ahead and we straighten it out or we take care of it. But the reason why we are having so many disconnects or we have so many problems is because people no longer communicate with each other. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again has put us in a situation where do or die. Do or die. We're here now. What are we going to do with it? Now I'm face to face with my wife. I can't run anywhere. I have to stay home. Talk to her. And this is the thing. In many cultures, unfortunately, in many cultures, the woman is not given her due. The Prophet Muhammad salam liberated women long before the American women were liberated, long before that. And what happened is it seemed like it just went back. And so it went to a point where now people think that a woman doesn't have a voice or she can't do anything and that this is Islam when it's not. She has just as much voice as you. She is important. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he went and he was taking the group of Muslims and he wanted to make the Umrah. And they told him, you can't do it this year. And this is the whole Treaty of Hudaybiyah. You remember the treaty? Without getting into the whole story, they couldn't do it. They said, well, maybe next year you can do it. People were disheartened behind that because they really wanted to go. The Prophet ﷺ said, shave your head and do the slaughter. They didn't listen. The Muslims didn't listen. What did he do? He went to his tent and he sought out his confidant, which was his wife at the time, Salama, our mother, radiallahu anha. And he asked her, or rather told her what the situation was. This is what's going on. This is what I told them to do. They didn't do it. She said, you are the messenger of Allah. Go back out. Don't say a word. Just shave your hair and slaughter the animal, and they'll follow you. And he did exactly that, and they did exactly what she said they would do, which tells me that he consulted with his wife. So yes, she has a voice. So we need to let her have her voice and let her be able to express herself. And that's where sometimes the tension comes in. It's not all about what I want, not all about what I say. It's about what we say together, because Allah brought us together as a team, and we have to work as a team, not just be all what I want and not what she wants. And I believe that relationships will stay connected. They'll do a whole lot better if they do this. Allah tells us, he says, when he sometimes some people translate it as after every difficulty comes ease. So we already told that there'll be difficult times in our lives. That even though we are going to find some difficulty in our lives, that we must remain patient. We must remain patient and persevere, because Allah said, "Qad aflaha mu'minun," the Muslims or the believers are winners, which tells me if I have the right mindset that we'll get through this. And the other thing for Muslims, if a Muslim really have their head on straight, Muslims have their head on straight, then they know that death is not the end. Death is the end in this particular situation. But we know and we do believe in life after death. So if it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I go, then I'm fine with that. If it's his will that I stay, then I'm fine with that. So the whole idea is if a Muslim has this kind of idea or this kind of concept in his head, they're going to be okay. Does that mean now that I just go out and say, well, you know, if Allah wants me to live, I'll live, and I just go out there and shake hands and hug people and just run everywhere? No, because the Prophet ﷺ said, tie your camel and then trust in him. Tie your camel. So you got to do everything within your power. So that means that if I do go out for something, I put the mask on, I put the gloves on, and I go out, get what I have to get, and I come on home and I wash and wash and wash and wash. So again, I'm looking at this as a way for us as Muslims to get tighter as families, because the smallest unit of the Islamic community is the family. And if the family is not right, I don't care what we say on top, the community is not right. We have to have strong, healthy families, and then we'll have strong, healthy communities. And I'll stop there for now, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, Imam Salahuddin.
Well, yeah.
That was insightful. I took quite good notes here. That was a
Alhamdulillah.
lot to unpack, alhamdulillah. I particularly liked what you said at the end. If the family ain't right, the community ain't right. And it all comes down to that first model. If we don't have that first building block,
Yes,
we can't build a pyramid
that's
on
right.
top of it.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. Before I ask Imam Salahuddin and Brother John some more questions, I'd like to remind all our viewers, those that are watching on the IR YouTube page, click through to our actual YouTube page, and you'll be able to see our live chat where we can take your questions in live. If you're unable to do that, feel free to message us on Instagram, that's at Raleigh Masjid, or on Facebook, we are Raleigh Masjid there as well. And we'd love to hear your questions. Otherwise, I will take up the next 28 minutes with Imam Salahuddin and Brother John. So Imam Salahuddin, you mentioned that winner's mindset, staying in place. Could you tell me more about that, of how do we achieve this mindset that we're gonna win, that we're gonna succeed?
Okay, so it's all about attitude. It really is. And the whole idea is that if you have a negative attitude, then you know everything is colored, and you move in a certain way. You feel dejected and all these kinds of things. But if you have a positive self concept and you think positively, then things begin to work for you. So, in terms of the belief that Muslims have, we say we believe in Allah, and then I ask sometimes, say we believe in Allah, but do we believe Him? Do we believe Allah? Allah said that the Muslims win. So it didn't say that we wouldn't go through things. We're going to go through things in life, but we will win as long as we stay committed to Him, meaning that we keep it in our minds that there's none that deserves to be worshipped except Allah alone without partners, and that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a slave, servant, and messenger. As long as we keep that as our foundation, we're going to win. That's in families, that's in marriages. Whenever I do a nikah, I say that at the center of the relationship is the Quran. And when I say the Quran, I mean the Sunnah as well, because it's a package deal. So if anything comes up, you should be able to go to that. You know what I found out? They're not doing that. And you know why they're having problems? Because they're not doing that. They're going to Miss Abby and this one and that one, astrology and all these other things, but they're not coming to the Quran, and they're not dealing with the Prophet Muhammad and his pristine purity as he laid it out, or as it is laid out in Hadith or in the Sunnah. And I believe that if people did that, that we'd have a better situation in our communities and in our lives and in ourselves. So for me personally, I have arthritis, kind of like, it seems like it's a crippling type of arthritis. So I'm in pain a lot, but it doesn't bother me to the extent that I won't work or do something. You know, I'm going to still do, because I believe that no matter what, it's nothing compared to what the Prophet ﷺ went through. Nothing compared to that. So I will be okay. Just do as much good as you can do in this time. And that's the reason why when I heard about this team, I wanted to be a part of it, because I like helping people. And I believe that this was a team that would be able to do that. And so I said, I want to be a part of it. And I'm thankful that the team accepted me.
Alhamdulillah. You mentioned about marriage, and that key building block of marriage has to be the Quran and Sunnah. You know, that's why in Arabic they call a marriage katab al-kitab.
Yes.
Right? It's
yes.
that foundation of it comes from the Quran. So alhamdulillah, just going back to that, as opposed to, relying on astrology, seeing if you're a Taurus or an Aries, but coming back to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has passed down, what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us to do, there's so much benefit there, so many virtues available there.
Oh, yes.
Another thing I like, before we get to questions, I see Sister Nahid Khan and Brother James Lyon asked some wonderful questions. We'll get there in a second. But I particularly liked your analogy where you discussed tawakkul, but the lens of washing your hands and wearing a mask. Could you restate that for us again, Imam Salahuddin?
Okay, so the idea is this, and sometimes people get it backwards. They say trust in Allah and tie your camel, but the hadith says tie your camel and then trust in Allah, because the Prophet ﷺ saw the brother with the camel that wasn't tied up, and he asked him about him, and he said, I trust in Allah, and that's when the Prophet ﷺ told him, tie your camel and trust in Allah. So it's telling us as human beings that we ought to do everything within our power. What can we do in our power to keep things away from us, to keep this disease away from us? Is the mask helping to protect you? Then we do that. Is the gloves helping to protect you? Then we do that. Is social distancing helping to protect you? Then we do that. So now if something should happen anyway, then hey, mashallah. But the point is, what we are hearing from the professionals, they're saying that social distancing is working. Governor Cuomo in New York is saying that it's working. But he's saying, look, we may have reached the apex, but don't get it twisted and say, okay, we're there now, and then go to a bar mitzvah or go to a seder or have a big, marriage party. No, we're not there yet. So we have to continue to do it. I don't know how long it's going to be, but the point is, do it. I think that we'd be acting foolishly if we decided, well, I'm not doing it. Like I heard one leader say, he's not buying the hype. He's not buying it. And he's saying, I'm not doing it. And I was saying to myself, well, brother, I think you're making a mistake by doing that, because I don't care if you are stronger than all the men on earth. But it's not about you as a person, one person. It's about your flock. It's about your congregation. And it's about the weakest link in your congregation. So if the weakest link could possibly be vulnerable to this virus, then we stay home and we promote that people should stay home so that that person won't get caught up in it. Not so much because I feel I'm so strong that I can handle it. Now that would be true leadership. That, you sacrifice your own ego and say, look, stay home. Put the mask on if you go out. Keep washing. And for us, we wash our hands a lot. But we should get into it and make sure that we do it. And Allah will bless us, I believe, to come out of this thing okay.
SubhanAllah, Imam Salahuddin, that was insightful. It's a great time to have a wedding right now. You only have 10 people there.
You have to spend so much money, huh? Yes, sir.
Exactly. A live stream of the guests.
They're having virtual ones now. I mean, they're having the people there and they're having it. It's like things are changing. Believe me, I don't believe that we'll be going back to normal. I believe that it will be the new normal.
It's going to be tough times ahead of us, definitely. Now, I have a question for Brother John. This comes from Brother James Lyon over the chat, and he says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. Jazakallah khair for your wonderful work, John. What are some coping mechanisms for couples if an argument does happen in a confined space?
Sure. So I think one important strategy that can be really helpful is to recognize that sometimes when these disagreements happen, things can get very intense, and all of us have differing levels of intensity when we get upset, and sometimes it gets to a point where we're not going to solve it until we bring that intensity down. So even in my work as a therapist, if I have somebody who is clearly just overwhelmed by emotion or is overwhelmed by anger even. I may even hit the pause button on the session and say, hey, let's take a break here. Let's have you guys, we'll take a walk around the clinic here, take a bathroom break, go get some water, and let's come back. And that can be really useful at home as well. There's a real value in taking some time to cool off before we then try to go and solve the problem. We're going to think clearer when we're not feeling as upset. We're going to feel more able to come to a compromise than we were when we were feeling really upset. And so that cooling off can be really helpful. Sometimes changing the context where this happens can make a big difference. So there was one family therapist out there, when I was in school, read one of his books, and he talked about a couple he had that would say, we'd get in these really intense arguments all the time at home. And we go from 0 to 100 in a couple seconds. And one of his sayings was, well, you know, what's the difference that makes the difference? And he would say, well, you know, does that happen? I think this happened to be a Christian couple, but does this happen when you go to church? No. Well, what about when you go to a parent-teacher conference? Do you guys erupt in a screaming argument there? No. Okay, so we have some control over these things. And one of the things I believe in as a family therapist is that the environment that we sit in can have a big impact on how we behave. And so sometimes changing where we're having that conversation can make a big difference. Couples sometimes recognize that when we're in the kitchen around dinner time, we get really upset, or if it's when the kids are doing homework, whatever it might be. If you're able to change where that happens, just as there's might be more likely at this point to have an argument at this point in the day, you know, when the kids are getting ready, maybe you also recognize that things tend to go better at this other point in the day when the kids are down for a nap and all of a sudden we've got a chance to take a deep breath and relax. Maybe that's the time to come back to these more difficult topics. Yeah. And also recognizing that we all have, you know, we all have faults. And I think we're all more able to recognize that when we get into a better space. And so this therapist I mentioned before, he had this couple that was arguing like crazy. And what he did, he says, okay, well, next time that happens, I want you to stop. And rather than arguing in the kitchen, what I want you to do is I want you to go over to the bathroom. One of you, you know, still have your clothes on. One of you sit in the toilet. The other one, they just sits in the bathtub without the water on. Now, then I want you to continue having your argument. You know, the idea is that this is kind of ridiculous, right? It'll feel kind of crazy to continue that because now this feels like, you know, but we're still talking about the same topic, right? We're coming back to the same idea, but suddenly we don't feel as intense anymore. And so I give you that big long story to say that I think there can be a ton of value in trying to pick when you have these discussions, and also recognizing when you're not in a good place to have them. And both of you, both partners or both family members having the ability to say to each other, look, I need a minute, and having that be recognized so that, okay, I get it, right? Somebody here, or maybe both of us need a minute to cool down, we'll come back to it. I know for myself personally, I don't respond well when either literally or figuratively the door gets slammed in my face. I feel like the problem is still there and we haven't resolved it. But other people need that time to think and to ponder things before they come back and talk about it. And there can be tremendous value in being able to say, look, I get it. I'm going to come back to this. We don't feel like we're pushing it off, but we got to come back to it later. I can't do it right now. So that's one strategy I give to couples. The other thing I would say, and this gets back to something that I mentioned earlier, having an ability to take those disagreements and table them for a period of time. There are times when we can't, right? There are obviously really difficult topics that we can't just put off to the side. But there are sometimes things we disagree on that we can put off the larger discussion for a little bit of time so that, say, we can go enjoy a walk together. Or if we're going to watch a movie at home where we can still enjoy that. So we haven't poisoned the well, so to speak. And I tell couples that are having a really difficult time all the time that is an enormous skill to be able to uh, still enjoy your time together, even while you're doing the difficult work of making a relationship better. And so I think if couples can commit to trying to do that, to trying to still be able to enjoy time together, even when things aren't perfect in their relationship, I think that can help keep things moving along. And it also helps keep it so you can continue to do that difficult work, so you're not burning yourself out.
I agree with you 1000%, John. If you don't mind, I really
Yeah,
do.
please.
And in fact, sometimes people just need their space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded of the hadith where the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the person that if they are angry, if they feel angry and they're standing, to sit down.
Mm.
And if they still feel that the intensity that you're talking about, then lay down. And I tried it and it was working with it. And I said, look, you're standing and you right? But you can't do that much if you're sitting down. And if you still feel that way, it's not going to work that way when you're lying down. So he's giving you steps that you could take to come out of it. What I found is that we know what buttons to push.
Oh, sure.
The wife knows what buttons to push to upset you. The husband knows what buttons to push to upset or make a person feel good. So the thing is, don't push those buttons unless we're doing it for a reason. I'm pushing all these buttons because I want to get out of this relationship. So I'm pushing all these buttons, right? No, if you're really serious about being with your mate, then you know what buttons not to push. You don't push those buttons. What you talked about in terms of changing the venue,
Right.
go somewhere else, not being right there at that particular time, it works. It works. I know it works because the heat is down now.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can have, in couples where sometimes things get very intense, where we might worry about one partner or the other, or both being violent towards one another. One of the first things we suggest is, don't have an argument in the kitchen, right? There are way too many things that can be dangerous there. Go have it in the living room.
Yeah.
Go sit on the front porch even, right? Or maybe not the front porch, maybe the back porch, but find a place that is safer. But I think that word safe can also be, even outside of that more extreme circumstance, can be really helpful when we talk about emotional safety as well. It's important to put ourselves in a place where, in a context or a venue where we can feel most able to share what we're feeling, because the only way we get to resolution is by talking about how we're feeling. And I think on a deeper level, what we want instead and why. I tell people sometimes when they're trying to interpret what their partner is doing, and they tell me, well, he is doing this or she's doing that. Why are they doing that? I said, well, let's think about that. On a deeper level, where do you think that comes from?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think they want? And I think sometimes that can be helpful when we think about a family member is doing something that we don't particularly like, or that annoys us, or whatever it might be. To just think about, okay, well, maybe we don't like what they're doing, but why are they doing it, right? Is there something they want out of that? And is there an alternative we can find, right? Where they still get what they want, but maybe it's in a way that, is easier for us.
That's taking it to another step, thinking a little deeper. And I think that's important. People don't want to think so deep, but you're taking it, when you think deeper, you begin to see other ways to deal with the situation.
Right. And I almost think of it, I tend to be more of a big picture person. And so I think of it almost kind of zooming out and saying, rather than, well, this couple argues over, who takes the trash out. Well, ultimately, it's not really about what's going on with the trash. That might be the topic of the day, but it's really about feeling like, because you don't do that, I don't think you care about me, or because you don't do that, I feel like you're letting me down. So if we can get at that, we can start talking about, well, how can we find ways where you feel like this person is stepping up, where they care about you, where you feel like you're that you're wanted and loved and a welcome part of this family.
Those are both some excellent points of making sure people feel wanted and loved, as well as changing the context of an argument. Something that my dad always tells me is, if you're going to argue with someone or you're mid-argument, make sure you're eating first. Just put something in your body so you're not hangry, you're not agitated, you're emotionally feeling well.
I would agree with that. I think that's a good thing.
There you go. I mean, if you've got food in your mouth, you can't argue as well either. But that actually ties us into 2 more points, and we got 2 more questions. One is about emotional health being tied to physical health. We'll get to that one in a second. But our first question comes from Nahid Khan, who asks, taking the same dynamic between a couple of maybe the same generation, let's alter that generation a bit. How do you juggle when you have, say, teenagers and parents that are not on the same page? How do you handle that kind of relationship between families that might disagree, might have an argument? Especially now, we have a lot of immigrants in our community. Children might be very westernized, very Americanized. Parents might be slightly more traditional. How do we handle the dichotomy there? And what are some strategies as far as that goes?
I would say, similar to what I said a second ago, my first thought as a therapist is I want to get at not just, okay, mom got mad at me for this or dad got mad at me for that, or on the flip side, my son keeps doing this, my daughter keeps doing that. Getting to that deeper emotional part. I don't like that you're doing that, but I here's what I want for you, right? Here's what I want. And it's not to say that a kid is going to instantly come around to what you have to say. I recognize that teenagers can be a difficult bunch sometimes. And it can seem sometimes that they're built to sometimes be rebels with us. And so I do recognize that. But I find it's always good when we can move things to an emotional plane, when we can talk about how I feel and what I want for you, what my goals are for you. And likewise for the children, what do they want out of these family relationships? What do they want to happen in their family? And how can we bring that about? It's amazing sometimes when there's conversations between family members. The things that come up, and it's sometimes really simple things. As they said in my bio in the beginning, I work at a cancer center. And so sometimes these questions of what do you want to do together take on a lot more weight there. But you'd be amazed that it's really small things that kids really appreciate sometimes. It's just being able to sit and watch a movie together, or to play a board game together goes a long way, or reading a book, whatever it might be. So, getting back to the question, I guess I really think it helps when you get down to how are you feeling? What is it that you want? What are you scared of? What are you hoping for? Talking about those emotions, what we feel inside ourselves, what we feel for that other person, what we want for them. When those conversations happen, it can really go a long way. That said, I know that those conversations can be difficult. Teenage boys that I've worked with are notorious for being really difficult to get at emotionally sometimes. But I think if you keep working at it, and if you find yourself continuing to hit a wall, it may be worth touching base with a counselor or a therapist to see if they can help facilitate that conversation and help that go a little bit smoother. The health team at IAR can help connect you to somebody, or you're welcome to look on your own. But I think sometimes that professional help can be important, and it's something that, as Imam Salahuddin said, it's important to consult with people who have that knowledge. And I don't purport to know all the answers, but I think that I have some training that can help, or people that have training like me could help. And so don't be afraid to seek that help when you need it.
And you know something, John, one of the things too that I see is that oftentimes the teenager is just dismissed. The parent dismisses the teenager as though the teenager doesn't have a voice, or doesn't have a mind, or they can't bring something to the table. And so that they begin to struggle with that because we're not respecting them. And so now they're rebelling because we're not listening to them. Now, I'm reminded of the story about the sister that came to the Prophet ﷺ and said she wanted a divorce, and he wanted to know why. And she said, because my father, he told me to marry this person, right? He didn't ask me. He told me to marry this person. He married me to this person. And then when it came down to, do you want a divorce? She said, no, he's a good man. I'm okay with it, but I just wanted it to be known that I have a voice. Don't just do things like that without recognizing that I have a voice. Let me have my say. And so these teenagers, look, I got my granddaughter will be 8 in a few days. We have adult conversations, and we sit down and we at the table, at the dinner table, and talk. She's right there with us. She has a beautiful vocabulary, and she sometimes corrects something that may happen. She corrects. So now I'm gonna say, because she's 8, I'm not gonna listen to her because I'm an old man. No, she's correct, and I respect her. And so I believe that, we're helping her to grow properly, but we're respecting her as a person.
Right. I think. Go ahead. Yeah, I think that. I think that's enormously important, that we allow people to have a seat at the table. And I think, one of the hardest things that we have to do in order to allow somebody to do that is to recognize that even though we disagree with them, right, they're allowed to have a perspective. We don't have to agree with it, but they're allowed to have it and voice it. And then we can work with it, right? We can figure out where the compromise is.
Yeah.
But yes, as you said, we have to allow them to have that seat at the table. And when I sit down and if I work with a teenager in my job, I'll sometimes say to them, just so you know, I'm not here just to rat you out to your parents, and it's not that I'm going to encourage you to do anything bad, but I want you to be able to come here and say that I've got a place where I can talk and what I have to say is going to be valued and not just tossed out the window. Now that said, I should say, if somebody comes in and there's something I'm concerned about with the kids, I'll certainly talk to the parents. But I think it's important to give kids the idea that their point of view matters, even if you don't agree with it, but that they can voice it and that then you can discuss it.
And those are some excellent suggestions of giving them their own voice, making them feel like they have some equity and some equality in the family. Right. A seat at the big kids table or a seat at the adults table. Excellent suggestions. Now, going back to our previous conversation about couples connecting, we suggested that one of the coping methods was to maybe change the context.
Right.
And I think that was suggested here with children as well, maybe engaging them in some sort of activity. Imam Salahuddin mentioned that his granddaughter is involved with the dance team. So could you very briefly tell me about the benefits and the validity of going outdoors, being active together as a family as a means of improving mental health?
Yeah, I think that's an enormous part of how we help keep ourselves in the best mindset that we can. Being able to, there's something special about being able to step outside, whether that's in a state park or just walking down the street in front of your house. There's something special about getting out there, being able to enjoy being outdoors. Moving your body can be enormously helpful, and actually for some people can be a bit of a meditative experience. I worked with a gentleman in the past who was a distance runner, and he said to me, meditation and mindfulness and relaxation exercises, just sitting in my chair, doesn't work for me. When I sit still like that, my mind goes in a million directions. But he goes, when I run and I go run 10 miles, he goes, I get into this space where I'm paying attention to my breathing. I'm focusing on the pace that I'm running. He goes, I get in this zone that is incredibly relaxed. And just the way he talked about it, it sounded like, just this incredibly relaxing experience. And so I'm a big believer that, some activity is now, whether that's, you know, what we would term exercise, or whether that's a dance group, or I mean, even just going to a park with some friends and, you know, tossing a football around or a baseball or whatever it might be, or kicking a soccer ball around. All of those things can be very important in addressing these emotional difficulties. In fact, when we talk about psychology, there's a term out there called behavioral activation, which is a very fancy way of us making ourselves sound smart by giving a new name to just getting out and doing stuff. And so it can be a very important tool. And sometimes we'll tell people that are really, say, very depressed and find it very difficult to find the motivation to get out and to do things that are good for them, whether that's time with people or time being active, that we'll say, look, whatever you can do to muster that stuff, even if you don't feel the motivation, just get yourself out and go for a walk, or you know, go get a coffee with a friend. Generally, those people will come back after the fact and say, you know what, I felt better. I didn't feel like going when I left, but I felt a little better by the end of it. So I'm a big believer, and in the cancer world, I can say they recognize that as well. There are even studies out there that look at how exercise can be incorporated into the process of treatments in order to improve outcomes. So I'm a big believer.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair, John, for that. Definitely, exercise can be a huge benefit. You know, the psychosomatic or the physiological elements of that can impact the psychological elements of that.
Absolutely.
Exercise, and you know, getting that more oxygen in the body always helps out the brain. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, Imam Salahuddin, and Jazakallah khair, John, for joining us tonight. It has been a wonderful opportunity to have you on the broadcast. I see we have a couple more questions. What I'm going to do, inshallah, is I'm going to pass these off to Imam Salahuddin and Sajan, and we'll get some answers for those in the future and bring them back. I definitely loved having you on the show today.
It was a pleasure being with you.
Or if you have another moment, maybe we can tackle one last question.
I'm fine.
Sure.
Okay. Perfect. So someone asks about acknowledging the family members and teens and their passions. I think it's more of a statement, actually. My apologies. They suggested that it's important to acknowledge your teens and family members' passions during this time. If, say, someone likes playing video games, engage them with that on video games. Or if someone likes to maybe wash the car, do housework around the house, maybe take this time to learn a new hobby with your family was the suggestion, I believe. And just to get engaged, make everyone feel like you're part of it and you're enjoying things together. Yeah. So wonderful suggestion, James. Once again, Jazakallah khair to Imam Salahuddin and to Brother John Schweikler. I got it this time.
You got it.
If people wanted to contact Imam Salahuddin and Brother John, they're available with the IR mental health team. That is raleighmasjid.org/health. And you can book a virtual appointment with Imam Salahuddin and Brother John during this tough time. If you want to have some counseling, or you want to get some feedback on how you and your family can work together, maybe do a couples counseling session, I think that's an option.
Well, what we'll do is we kind of do a brief assessment of what the current needs are, and we then develop a plan to make a referral. So it's not typically an ongoing therapy process, but we can provide some sort of in the moment support, and then hopefully make a plan for more longer term follow-up. Would you agree with that, Imam?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I've only set up the website and the scheduling system, so I don't know how it works, but alhamdulillah. Yeah. That sounds awesome. And this goes back to what we said in the beginning of what Brother John said of making a plan, that you got to communicate, you got to make that plan. And this is all about making a plan to maybe have long-term care with someone else or be referred out. So alhamdulillah for that. Jazakallah khair to our esteemed panelists. As a reminder, tomorrow we will have Imam Muammar joining us, and we'll be discussing the fiqh of janazas during this coronavirus time. bodies might be infected with coronavirus, and what are the extra precautions we're going to take should there be a case of that during this tough time.
Very good. And
Now I'd like to pass it over to Imam Salahuddin to close us off with Surah Al-Asr, as he mentioned earlier, and with a final dua, inshallah.
Kashif, I just wanted to let you know that we appreciate you too for all that you do.
Of course, Imam Salahuddin.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Oh Allah, continue to guide us and protect us. Keep us on the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Give us the strength to overcome the obstacles in our path. Keep the coronavirus away from us, oh Allah. And we pray that you help this community all over the world, the community come together, that we be closer to one another, that we have heartfelt discussions and families coming together, loving each other and protecting each other and working with each other. And all our, we pray that our Islamic communities come closer together, even if it's virtual. We pray that we all die not unless we die in a state submitting to your will. Ameen.
Ameen, Imam Salahuddin. Jazakallah khair to our guests. Jazakallah khair to our panelists. Inshallah, I'll see everyone tomorrow at 8 p.m. Jazakallah khair. Have a wonderful night.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.